When you're working with a band, is there a favorite part of the session that you have? Is there something you really look forward to every time?
Typically, to me, there's like little peaks. The first peak is when you start pushing the faders up and you start hearing the sounds, and they're all awesome.
Right.
And it's like, this is going to sound good. So there's that one, And then you get into the work, and then you sort of get into sort of a work mode, But then at the end of the day, you've achieved 3 or 4 basic tracks, and you feel really good. I mean, for me, it's like super emotional. Based on what I'm hearing,
Right.
So every time we reach some kind of sonic peak, I start feeling good. It's almost like a physical sensation, and I feel that way about mixes too. It's really funny about mixes. There's a point where it gels, and it's like, I mean, it probably really is some sort of like neuron reaction
coming in sync,
that I can feel,
Right.
So those are the good parts.
Yeah. So one big question I think our artists might have is what mixing is. Is there any way you could kind of give us a layman's description of what you think the process of mixing really does for a song?
Basically what you're doing is you're just making a pleasant sound, and the pleasant sound is the volumes of things and the tonalities and the sense of space and location and predominance of one sound over another. All this is achieved with these nuts and bolts devices, but what you're going for is a psychological effect.
Right.
You have to make a sort of hyper-vivid thing for a recording. When you walk into a band's rehearsal space, it's kind of amazing sounding because it's so loud, right? But a record has to work like at tiny volumes and maybe make you feel like it's loud. That's a whole different kettle of fish.
That's interesting.
And that's where mixing gets kind of interesting.
I wondered if you could maybe speak a little bit about what mastering is, what it does, kind of, your thoughts on it.
So the number one consideration really was to make records where, and people's houses, the needle wouldn't jump out of the groove. Because if the needle jumped out of the groove, the people would bring their records back and want their money back, and so that couldn't happen. So mastering developed, techniques to start to control really loud peaks and things like that would tend to cause the needle to jump out of the groove, And so that's where it started to become a little bit creative. And really what it comes down to is that it's a little bit different perception, because if you're mixing the record or you're making the record, you're very much aware of all the little pieces in it. The mastering person, theoretically has never heard this before and can hear it as a whole, which is kind of a useful perspective.
Definitely.
And that's where I think that extra step is still really useful. There's nothing to stop you now from, at the minute you finish your mix, immediately making a CD out of that, putting it on the internet, or cutting a vinyl record. There's nothing to stop you from doing that.
Sure.
But I do think that one more listen, in between those two stages is still really good. But it can also go wrong. So you have to be smart about your mastering person, and you have to be willing to listen to what they do and comment on it.
So you're trying to shape the record as a whole at the last stage, as opposed to mixing where you're taking individual pieces and putting them
Well, that's
together.
true. I mean, of course, you might just master a song.
Sure.
Somebody might do a club mix and you get that club mix mastered.
Right.
You can do that. But yes, in so many situations, that's right. The mastering thing is the thing that looks at it as a whole. So one of the obvious things that you take care of right there is getting the volume from one song to the next to be right.
Right.
Sometimes psychologically you just need to adjust that a little bit, that kind of thing.
Right.
Or sometimes, because you might, you'll spend a whole day mixing a song. So on one day you might just tend to mix a little brighter, the next day you might tend to mix a little bassier, and to sort of even that out is sometimes good, just subtle stuff.
Right.
But all those little subtle things do add up, and the mastered record should always sound a little better than what you were finished with before you did that.
If a band asked you, do we need to get this record mastered, you would probably say yes.
I would probably say yes. I just appreciate the expertise of the mastering engineers, and I appreciate like I was saying, the perspective they have that's different, but it is not actually required.
Right.